Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we are diving into something absolutely wild. Honestly, it's so bizarre and hilarious that we literally just had to unpack it for you guys. We're looking at a brand new manuscript called The Lamp at Noon. It's this massive, 155,000 character attempt to perfectly capture the voice of the ancient philosopher Diogenes. But here's the catch. We aren't just summarizing this book today. Oh no, we are digging into three completely separate, absolutely savage critiques of it, generated by AI reviewers, Claude, Gemini, and Grok. And let me tell you, they completely tear apart the dizzying irony of this text. So let's just jump right in and see exactly what happens when you try to turn the ancient world's most chaotic, unhinged philosopher into a polished piece of modern literature.
This quote right here, this perfectly sets the tone for everything we're about to talk about. You absolute degenerates have done it. That is literally how Grok opened its review. I mean, the AIs did not hold back even a little bit. They recognized right out of the gate that the authors of this manuscript attempted something incredibly audacious, and they met that audacity with an uncompromising roast. The main theme across all three of these critiques is just this hilarious disbelief at the sheer disrespect of the whole project. But what did these authors actually do to provoke this kind of digital wrath? Well, to figure that out, we got to look at the original subject himself.
Section 1. The original dog. Who actually was Diogenes?
Right, so to really grasp why these AI critiques are so scathing, we have to first understand cynicism. And actually, scratch that. I don't mean modern cynicism where people are just grumpy on the internet. I mean the ancient Greek philosophy. As you can see, this was all about extreme, uncompromising, anti-institutional authenticity. It was this raw, jagged refusal of civilization and social conventions, all in favor of living what they called naturally. Think of it as the ultimate hardcore rejection of the corporate rat race, just, thousands of years before the rat race even existed. And Diogenes didn't just teach this stuff, he embodied it in the most extreme ways you can possibly imagine.
I mean, look at the gritty reality of this guy's actual life. Diogenes literally lived in a barrel in the middle of the marketplace. He ate raw onions, he performed his bodily functions, and yes, I mean all of them right there in public. Gemini makes this really great point that he was basically a tactical disruptor. He used pure physical shock value to break people's intellectual complacency. His entire philosophy was essentially a sledgehammer taken straight to polite society. Okay, keep that mental image locked in your head as we look at what the authors of The Lamp at Noon ended up turning him into.
Section 2. A polished counterfeit. The gentrification of Diogenes.
The contrast here is just staggering. I mean, historically, this is the exact same man who famously told Alexander the Great, the most powerful man in the world, to get out of his sunlight because he was blocking his tan. But in this book, well, Gemini describes the book version of Diogenes as a high-functioning melancholic having a post-structuralist identity crisis. I mean, no way, right? He's agonizing over whether his rejection of performance is itself a performance. The AI reviewers quickly note that the real Diogenes absolutely did not sit around writing recursive essays about his brand identity. He was way too busy shouting at strangers in the street.
So the crucial point here is summed up perfectly by Grok. You gentrified the dog. This right here highlights the supreme irony of this entire manuscript. The authors took the literal patron saint of screw your conventions and gave him this deep existential literary interiority. They essentially domesticated the ultimate cynic into a wise, introspective author. It's just a fundamental, almost comical mismatch of character and presentation.
Which naturally leads us to this massive number, 155,000 characters. To put that into perspective, that is a thick novel's worth of text for a man whose standard for philosophy was literally just the ability to talk to myself. And yet these authors wrote thousands upon thousands of words of him having a highly nuanced, contradictory, hypersensitive monologue. As Grok so savagely pointed out, if the real Diogenes could have afforded Tinder, he would have used this massive manuscript to start a fire.
Oh, but the betrayal gets even more specific. They gave him a glossary. Claude zeroes in on this as the absolute ultimate betrayal of the character. I mean, think about it. The man whose entire philosophical method was to be so aggressively himself that polite society literally convulsed, was given a helpful little appendix just in case the reader didn't know what a Greek marketplace was called. It is the exact opposite of everything the historical figure ever stood for.
Section 3. Stock characters and tropes. The supporting cast.
Okay, so Gemini provides a truly devastating breakdown here. As you can see, these aren't real humans, they're archetypes engineered for a highly controlled environment. You have the young philosopher, who just acts as an earnest punching bag, and the wealthy man who is dropped in purely to validate Diogenes' choice to live in a barrel. The reviewers argue, and pretty convincingly I might add, that the authors basically constructed a perfectly controlled laboratory for their main character to completely dominate.
And Claude hits the nail right on the head with this one. She's not a character, she's a thesis dressed as a woman. The character being discussed here, Thea, actually brings up a totally valid point that not everyone has the privilege to just drop out of society. But she only exists in the story to be wrong, just so Diogenes can drop a clever zinger and look superior. She leaves in a huff, and Diogenes just gets to look completely, smugly self-aware.
Claude actually calls this the Socratic dialogue problem. Have you ever, won an imaginary argument in the shower? Yeah, that's exactly what this is. When you get to write both sides of the conversation, it's incredibly easy to win every single argument. The manuscript completely refuses to grapple with actual messy counter-arguments. Diogenes, as he's written here, is never genuinely challenged. Every single interlocutor is just a convenient prop, set up just to be dismantled so the main character can look intellectually superior.
Moving on to Section 4, the ultimate meta-irony, performing non-performance.
All right. So here are the greatest hits of this meta-roast. The authors actually claimed this was a lost manuscript, which Claude hilariously calls the philosophical version of tagging your fanfiction as found footage. I love that. They even wrapped this gritty street provocateur in layers of highly consumable digital framing, essentially turning him into a polished, easily digestible product.
And then, oh man, then there's the ending. The authors trail off mid-sentence to simulate Diogenes dying while writing, which, to be fair, Claude admits has earned gravitas. But then, they literally add a note explaining that the rest of the page is blank. Let that sink in for a second. In a book about a man who spent his entire life mocking people for explaining the obvious, the authors couldn't just let a blank page speak for itself. They literally had to annotate the silence.
And then they actually broke the fourth wall to prove they were in on the joke. The authors wrote an afterword just to demonstrate that they totally understood the irony of what they had just written. They tried to preempt any criticism to seem humble about it. But as Claude astutely points out, performing your lack of performance to seem humble is actually the least humble thing you can possibly do. By trying to outsmart the criticism, they walked right into their own trap. Checkmate, dog.
Which brings us to Section 5, the final verdict. Did they succeed?
Surprisingly enough, amidst all this brutal roasting, there is actually some genuine praise. Gemini concedes that the text is exceptionally well written and that it beautifully captures the haunting transition of aging and physical decay. And Claude delivers this absolutely fantastic summary. It's a good book. Diogenes would have hated it, which means we got something right. So they successfully created a highly polished counterfeit.
Claude even goes on to joke that Diogenes would have probably found the thick manuscript to be a perfectly adequate doorstopper. And honestly, for a guy whose only standard for an object was whether it was physically useful or not, that is literally the highest form of honest praise he could ever possibly give.
Which ultimately leaves us with this incredible paradox. Did we just write 155,000 characters about the futility of performance? The authors wrote a massive, beautifully structured narrative to prove that turning philosophical insight into a consumable product is futile. And it's a trap we all fall into, right? Trying so hard to perform authenticity that it just becomes, well, another performance. They proved Diogenes' point by performing the exact opposite.
And honestly, I can't think of a better way to end this explainer than with Grok's final provocative sign-off. It just perfectly captures the tension between the raw truth of the historical Diogenes and the polished content of our modern world. The cosmic joke was perfectly performed. Thank you so much for joining me for this breakdown of The Lamp at Noon. It really leaves you wondering, though, how much of our own pursuit of authenticity is really just another performance.